What is up, guys, and welcome back to a special and exciting episode. This month marks the 20th anniversary of ownership of this 2002 Acura RSX Type-S in Arctic Blue Pearl. I bought this car with 6 miles on it, and today it has well over 259,000 miles on it. Original engine and transmission, for that matter. I'm going to go over the walk-around tour, ownership costs, types of repairs as endured, accident damage, mechanical parts as needed, and my future plans with it. So without further ado, let's check out this 20-year-old gem of a car. All right, guys, today is a special day. This is the 20th birthday of my 2002 Acura RSX Type-S in Arctic Blue Pearl. I figured I'd give you guys a tour of this vehicle, what it's been through, its history, what I like about it, what I don't like. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you the negatives first before we go and get into positives. So let me go ahead and show you the damages that have occurred in this car in the past 20 years. Now right here, I've got some chipping paint on the front bumper, and that was from an ex-girlfriend that hit a traffic cone on the highway. And also on the bumper, I got some rock scrapes here on the side. And there's a big rock chip with missing paint on the hood. So let me give you the backstory on that rock damage. Basically, I was going around a curve and I was about to hit a bridge, and all of a sudden I see all these small rocks just bouncing all over the road, cars hitting their brakes, jamming on the shoulders. I didn't know what to do. I was in panic mode. So I basically jammed my brakes and got quickly behind a work van until we came to a stop. But I was just totally crazy. I could have had a lot more damage, but those two little rock chips, that's just not too bad for the circumstances. Okay, right here, I've got a dent on the driver's side door, and that is my mistake. I was actually using a table saw to make a speaker enclosure for an old Corvette I was restoring. And basically that piece of wood just kicked back and just hit that door as hard as it could. And I was so upset I did that, but you know, it's not the end of the world. And I got some parking lot damage, unfortunately, behind the driver's side door. I try to park this thing carefully, but people just don't care about your vehicle. And I believe this ding and dent right here, that's from a van that parked next to me. Now I do have a little bit of rust buildup under the paint. I don't know exactly how this thing is happening, but as you can see, it's starting to bubble up right there. I might actually take a grinder and just grind this down. I mean, I'm reaching behind here and I feel nothing as far as rust because I always wash out my fenders every time this car sees salt. So it kind of baffles me how I'm getting some paint bubbling right there. Now, the biggest damage this car's ever sustained was this car was rear-ended. I was stopped at a red light, waiting to turn right, and there's pedestrians crossing the street on the right-hand side. And all of a sudden, I just felt the car just boom. Looked in my rear view mirror and there was a Ford Explorer. Lady was so embarrassed, had her hands in her face, and I was extremely upset. But after that information was exchanged, photographs were taken, and the police report was completed, at least that lady was nice enough to shake my hand because she knew how mad I was. Anyhow, the whole body wall was replaced on the back side. So this car was lowered back in the day. I think it was lowered by about 2.5, 3 inches. And basically when she hit me, it missed the frame rails. So fortunately, when this car was on coilovers and lowered about 3 inches, it saved its life because you got the crash bar about right in this area right here, and she hit about right there. So if this car was 3 inches higher, she would hit that crash bar and collide those frame rails, and this car would have been totaled. So fortunately, there's no frame damage on this car. So essentially, the rear body wall had to be cut out, taillights were replaced, the rear hatch was replaced, and the rear bumper was replaced. And also there's a little bit of quarter panel pulling that had to be taken care of on this side. Now I was concerned that the insurance company was going to total this car out because the car had 150,000 miles at the time. So I basically bargained with the insurance company. I was like, look, I don't want this car totaled. You guys can go ahead and put some used OEM parts on there. So sure enough, this is a used rear hatch. So this rear hatch used to be Redondo red, if I remember. But however, this bumper is a brand new bumper, but it's an OEM style. It's not an OEM Honda bumper. Now, one thing I don't like about these OEM style bumpers is they don't fit exactly like the OEM. As you can see, there's a small gap right there, and it basically just kind of tapers in. So the fitment's not perfect right there, align up with the body. And this right here is a JDM rear lip. It doesn't quite fit tight on the top right there with that gap. You can kind of push it back in. Now, right here where it meets up with the taillights in the trunk, that's okay. But as you can see here on the passenger side, you can see that big gap right there. And there's another small gap as well. And then right here on the roof, I have a little bit of paint oxidizing happening. I'm not sure exactly what's going on with that. This car is always in the garage, so I'm gonna have to go ahead and treat that sometime. And then right here on the sunroof frame, have a little bit of rust buildup on the inside. This is a common occurrence on early RSXs. I'll have to get a replacement at the junkyard one of these days. And as you'll notice on the driver's side mirror, there's some paint scrapes. I did that with a table saw, moving that in the garage. Couldn't see where I was going, and sure enough, I hit the mirror. It kind of folded in, but damage is already done. Man, these paragliders are out today. That's pretty crazy. There's 3 of them now. See that in the horizon? There's one right there and 2 in that region. So anyways, let's get into the fun stuff this car has. So this does have a lower front JDM lip. I like that design better than the OEM Acura lip. I think it was more cleaner. I believe the OEM Acura lip has like a little curve that goes upwards like that. Didn't like it too much. Now, however, on the side skirts, these are OEM Acura because they're actually larger than the JDM. I think it had a better design, so it's kind of a mix match. So I got a JDM front lower lip, I got USDM Acura side skirts, and I got a JDM rear lip, which has a cleaner design than the OEM Acura. I believe the OEM Acura doesn't have this flare out. It's basically got 3 notches on the inside like that. Oh, and also I do have a trailer hitch from Kurt mounted to this car. It is specifically made for Acura RSXs, so yes, this car does some towing. I have a utility trailer that I use to haul up construction debris, construction material, and also jukeboxes. And Honda actually has it pre-wired for a pigtail for towing electrical. So I did look up the specs. This is rated for 1,500 pounds and 200-pound tongue weight. Now for the wheels and tires, I have 05, 06 RSX Type-S OEM wheels in 17-inch. Now the stock 02 to 04 comes with 16-inch, whether you get Type-S or a base model. And the tire size is usually 215, 45, 17, but I always put 225, 45, 17s on here. Basically, it gives the tire a squared edge as opposed to a tapered edge that tapers up to the tread. So I don't know if you can quite see, but basically it's a square edge tire right there. I think it has a lot better fitment. And I've got Continental DWS 06 tires on 3 sides and a Michelin Pilot Sport AS3 on the 4th side. But long story short, I was driving back from my best friend's house late at night out in the middle of nowhere, and I had a blowout on the highway. Luckily, I was able to pull onto a truck rest stop and went to go get my spare tire, and rest assured, there was no air in the spare tire. So lesson learned, always check your air pressure in your spare tire about every 2 years, because those things do lose air. Anyhow, my friend's wife was gracious enough to arrive with the air compressor. I was able to blow the tire up and be on my way. So it was very nice of her to do that. And one thing I forgot to know about these wheels, I used to have these things painted like a gunmetal from Duplicolor. It didn't work out too well. I think the finish only lasted a few months before they started hazing up. So then I plastic dipped them white, and those things basically plastic dip. It's a very coarse finish, and all this dirt started getting stuck in the finish and whatnot. I actually had a friend that owed me a favor, so I had to go in and take chemical stripper and get that plastic dip off. That stuff is a mess getting off, so word to the wise, I'll never use plastic dip on anything again. But anyhow, once the plastic dip was stripped off chemically, took the wheels, and these things were sandblasted down, and then these things were powder coated white. So these things have been powder coated for a good 4 years now, and they've held up phenomenally. I don't know, I just think white wheels on a bright blue finish just looks great. I don't know, what do you guys think? You like these white wheels on this bright blue? And I've also painted the wiper arms Arctic Blue Pearl. I didn't do it, but I took them off and took them into a body shop, gave them the paint code, and a few days later, they gave me the wiper arms back. I believe I paid $75 for 3 wiper arms, and I think it looks phenomenal. These are not from the spray cans. These are professionally done, so the paint has held up phenomenally well in 19 years. And there it is on the back window. Can't forget the rear wiper arm. And also, this car has an OEM Acura rear spoiler. The JDM spoiler is pretty popular. It is very tall. It comes up here and it dips all the way across. It's just too huge for my taste. I didn't like the OEM at first. I actually picked this thing up used locally. I think it was 65 bucks I paid for this thing. Wasn't too bad, but I think it fits the car pretty well. It has a nice profile to it. It's not too aggressive. It's just kind of low state, I guess you can call it. What do you guys think? You like this OEM rear spoiler? Now, for the longest time, I had no spoiler on this car. So it was basically a smooth trunk. And about 3 years later, I just convinced myself to get a spoiler, but I didn't go crazy with that JDM wing. Just got the Acura OEM, and I think it's just a small, subtle wing. I don't know what you guys think. You like this? And then, of course, the windows have been tinted 35% ceramic. So I didn't want to get something too crazy, like 20%, that's too dark. So 35% like is the legal limit. Now this car also has the JDM headlights. The USDM Acura headlights have chrome in there. I couldn't stand that. So this is one of the first modifications I did to this car. So these lights are almost 20 years old as well. They got a little bit of condensation that builds up from time to time, but that black housing looks really sharp. And then my best friend Drew helped me polish these things out. These things were hazed up pretty bad. So no matter how many times you use those cheap McGuire's kits or Mother's, whatever it was, in those boxes, they just don't work. You need to get the kit with the sandpaper that requires wet sanding and buffing it out. So these things have been done for about 3 months now and they have not hazed yet, so they're perfect. All right, that about does it for the exterior upgrades I've done in this car. I'm gonna see if I can dig up some pictures of this car I had in the past, back from early 2000s. And if I've got some pictures, I'll go ahead and post them up here, but I don't know if I do. It's been, quite a long time. I have to dig through some boxes and whatnot. Okay, so you might ask yourself, what kind of maintenance is required on a car with 259,000 miles? Well, it's not too much actually. So I basically change the oil every 5,000 miles using synthetic. I believe it's 5W30. And I rotate the tires as well once it's on jack stands. So full tire rotation and oil change every 5,000 miles. Air filters, same interval as the factory recommends, about 30,000 miles. Same thing with the cabin air filters. So it's not too drastic. Now every car out there is going to require some type of repairs, no matter what the manufacturer is. Some just require more than others. Now this one right here, it's had some repairs in the past. So the first major one was about 169,000 miles. That was when the clutch started slipping. So I went ahead and took it up to a good mechanic. His name is John Chill. He has a great Honda shop over there in the Baltimore area. Anyhow, he told me that the clutch disc was still in good shape. However, the input shaft seal and transmission was torn and it was blowing transmission fluid over in the clutch case, which was making the clutch wet. So naturally, had the clutch replaced along with a stainless steel clutch line and a clutch master cylinder as well. And then once the transmission was opened up, because you have to open it up in order to replace that input shaft seal, we went ahead and did the TSX 6-gear conversion, which basically caused the engine to have lower RPMs on the highway. So I think it dropped it down by about 400, maybe 500 RPM, just to save a little bit of fuel, because the gearing on this car in 6th gear from the factory is just ridiculous. I think it was like hovering around 3,700 RPM, once you're around 65 miles an hour. Just didn't like it too much. So very popular modification for these RSX Type-S's with the 6-gear conversion for TSX. In addition to the clutch job, this car's been through 3 alternators. Now my friend Justin up in the Northeast area, he actually told me a little tactic in order to get easy access, because beforehand I was removing the intake manifold to get this thing off. So what you do is remove the passenger side headlights and you can actually pull the alternator through the headlight opening, which saved me about 2, maybe 3 hours of labor. So if you're watching this, Justin, thanks for the information. Also, the starter was replaced around 150,000 miles. And most recently, a power steering pump went out about 245,000 miles, I have to say. So I tried to get an aftermarket one. The thing was making a horrible whine sound. Ended up sending it back and found a low mileage RSX power steering pump from LKQ over there in Oklahoma, which was sent over and it just worked phenomenally. So there's a used power steering pump on there, but if you can go OEM, make sure you can go OEM and also replace those power steering pump seals, because those O-rings will go bad and you'll start having some weird noises. So what's the future hold for this Acura RSX, you may ask? Well, the next thing I need to order is lower control arms for the front. When I did a tire rotation last time, I noticed that the rubber was dry rotted around the joints of those lower control arms. So I believe Detroit Axle makes some nice aftermarket ones. I'll go ahead and replace those since they're preloaded with the bushings already. And we'll be sure to make a do-it-yourself video on how to replace those lower control arms on Acura RSX. And also, there's a small rust spot developing right in front of the rear fender. Let me go ahead and show you guys what's going on with that. The rust is actually popped through the paint. So what these manufacturers have been doing recently is there's voids on the inside of the body and they'll basically fill it with foam. And that basically acts like a road absorbing noise. So you hear less road noise, I guess, inside the cabin. And that's not good for the body because you got the foam and then you got sheet metal. And then once moisture gets trapped in there, it has nowhere to go. And it'll just basically rot away that panel and it'll start to go to the outside. So I believe that's what's going on. We're gonna have to totally cut it out. So we're gonna do our best in order to fix it ourselves and see what happens. If I have to learn how to weld, so be it. I guess that'll be a new DIY video to do. But anyhow, they just don't make these cars like they do nowadays. It's got thicker gauge metal. It doesn't have drive-by-wire throttle. It doesn't have all these driver aid computers and whatnot to go wrong. It's just one very basic car, which is what I like. It's got one ECU and one SRS control module, and that's about it. No other unwanted technology to go wrong. Well, okay, now that we saw the tour of the car, how long you plan on keeping it? Well, it's a very simple question. I've had this car for 20 years now, and it's just been with me side by side. It's been my daily driver. It's just my go-to vehicle. You know, I've bought other cars just to accompany those cars. You know, I've had a 91 Maxima, I've had a 69 Corvette, a 2016 Ford Mustang GT, and now a 2022 Toyota Tacoma. And I just don't see myself getting rid of this car anytime soon. It basically just never fails me. And I know if I get rid of this vehicle, I know I'm gonna regret it. I see other stories of people getting rid of their first car or their favorite car and they just, you know, kick themselves. And that's not gonna happen to me. So I love this thing. It's still fun to drive. It's very reliable. I keep up with the maintenance and it's in great shape for, you know, being 20 years old. So I have no plans to get rid of this vehicle. Now there's a big myth out there floating around the auto industry where once a car hits 6 figures or 100,000 miles, it's basically trash and get rid of it. And that is basically not true. Cars nowadays are designed with computers, much higher tolerances, better materials, better safety. So it's no longer the 1960s or 70s, or maybe the early 80s where a car barely hits 100,000 miles and you're lucky. There's better manufacturers out there, so just choose wisely, maintain your car and take care of it. And more than likely, it'll surpass 100,000 miles easily. So in essence, don't be afraid to drive a car past 100,000 miles because the way these things are engineered these days just basically surpasses of how they were engineered way back in the day where they barely made 100,000 miles. All right, one of the major things I've done on the inside of this car is I traded an 0506 base owner for my Type-S leather seats. Some people thought it was crazy to get rid of leather seats for what is cloth, but this is technically like a mesh right here, and this is suede on the side. Even though the bolster shows a little wrinkling right here, it's held up very well over the years. I've had these installed since about 2007, I believe, but these seats are actually phenomenal, and they're much more desirable than the leather seats are. Very comfortable, and they have basically a more beefier design than the 0204 seats. Seats are extremely comfortable, and they're more bulkier than the 0204 seats, especially this headrest area right here. So what do you guys think? You like these 0506 base seats, which are suede and mesh, or do you like the 0204 leather seats, which are prone to ripping here in the bolster and here on this bottom right here? Like I said before, these things have held up phenomenally over the years. I've also got the all-season floor mats I've had in this car since almost day one. Love these things. Heel pads wearing down a little bit right there. That's to be expected. And of course, this is 3 pedals, 6-speed only on the Type-S. I've got a dealer accessory, Acura OEM metal shift knob, as opposed to the plastic unit that came with the car. And this OEM steering wheel was designed and built by Momo. It is a perfect diameter, perfect thickness, fits well in my hand, and it's available on both base and Type-S models. So you don't have to get the Type-S in order to get the nice steering wheel. And I did replace the head unit back in the day for an Alpine. Basically, it's a CD player. Yes, I still play CDs sometimes. And it's got an iPod connectivity to it. It's a wired one, so it's not Bluetooth, but it works pretty well and has a red screen to it. It's hard to find aftermarket radios with red displays. Now, back in 0506, it was very hard to find aftermarket radios that had red illumination, and I wanted to find a radio that would basically match up with the gauges at night, because these things light up red. And as of today, this 2002 Acura RSX Type-S has 259,537 miles. Absolutely love this car still. Okay, regarding the rust spot in front of the rear wheels, this is what I'm talking about right here. I don't know if you can see on camera, but paint's starting to bubble. And basically that rust is coming from the inside going outwards. So it's not more than, I don't know, 1.5 inches tall by about 3/4 of an inch. But basically I'm gonna have to grind this down just to see how far this rust is. And then we'll have to probably weld in a small patch panel right here, finish it off. Because the only way to get rid of rust is to basically cut it out or grind it out. You don't want to just basically sand this and repaint it, because there might be some rust from the inside that'll basically come back. So this seems to be a common problem with a lot of Hondas. I've seen Preludes like this, I've seen some RSXs like this, and I've done my best in order to take care of this thing once I've drove this thing through salt by rinsing off the undercarriage and whatnot, but I believe there's probably some foam on the inside of this cavity right here, and that's basically trapping the moisture right there. So we'll go ahead and take care of this rust spot before it gets out of control. You leave this thing alone, Before you know it, this whole panel will be rotted out. All right, guys, going through my files, and lo and behold, found the original window sticker to the 2002 Acura RSX. Exterior color, Arctic Blue Pearl, interior ebony. So we got an MSRP price of $23,170. Destination handling $500, which totals $23,670. Now, I definitely did not pay this price. Obviously, I bought this car way back before the pandemic, so I actually paid $21,900, which was a phenomenal deal back in the day, talking to other folks in the RSX club. Now, as far as fuel economy is concerned, this is rated for 24 city and 31 highway. Realistically, I average about 29 miles per gallon, and I believe the TSX 6-gear conversion helps drastically in that situation. And then we got all the features here: 200 horsepower iVTEC, 6-speed transmission, all the safety features, interior, exterior. I'm not going to read them all to you. Parts content, engine and transmission come from Japan. 5% is here in the USA. And this is where it's delivered to, Jones Acura in Lancaster, PA. That's where I bought it. Now, regarding logistics on this car, shipping from Japan, looks like it first landed in Portland, Oregon, and then went to Baltimore, Maryland. I'm not sure if this is Wilmington, Delaware right there. Now, how cool is that? I found the original window sticker for this car. I'm definitely going to make a frame for this thing and hang this on the wall. Now, here's a cool piece of history on the RSX. This is a photo shoot that I did on my own using a tripod, and I used a Canon 35mm SLR camera. Photo quality came out pretty good, being it's 20 years old, but not as good as the new digital cameras. Anyhow, you got front view, 3/4 view, side view, and back view. And the only modification I did was the JDM headlights at this time right there. See the black housing? And you can kind of see the transformation of the car now. And within all these pictures, I'm 23 years old. And it's just amazing how time flies by. But anyhow, I had these pictures developed. My mom found them, and she actually surprised me with a Christmas gift. She put these in a custom frame, and I had no idea she was doing that, but this thing is pretty awesome. I've always had this thing hanging up in my house. Now, one thing I did forget to mention on the outside of the car is I did add a set of OEM fog lights. They look pretty good, plus they light up the sides of the road pretty well when you're driving at night. They're not exactly too bright, but they light up the sides of the road for the most part. So there's passenger side, and there's the driver's side right next to my license plate. Now, one bad thing about these OEM fog lights is they're made of glass. And these things had rock chips going through them, and they basically shattered. So I basically cut out the glass piece, got a piece of plexiglass, cut it out to shape, went in and glued it in position, put the snap ring in there, and these things have held up ever since. I believe I've had this situation for over, 6 years plus. All right, guys, get ready. I'm about to show you the engine bay, and I apologize in advance. This thing is filthy. I'm not the best engine detailer, but here goes. This is the 200 horsepower iVTEC dual red cam. Type-S obviously has the metal intake manifold. That's the easiest way to tell. Base model has a plastic one. Now, as far as modifications are concerned, I do have the JDM valve cover. And as you can see over the years, the finish is starting to chip away. Right there in the corner, you can see right there on the side. And I also have a Hasport passenger side billet engine mount. This thing is pretty awesome. I believe it's the softest setting. My OEM engine mount went out around 160,000 miles. So my friend James actually helped me change this thing out. And speaking of James, he actually helped me replace the timing chain on this motor around 200,000 miles. I heard that the chains can get stretched out and there's no service interval on that, so I went ahead and replaced the chain and replaced the tensioner and all the guides and whatnot, and this thing runs like a top. It was just a precautionary measure. And I also have a Comtech Shorty exhaust header installed in this motor. This thing has been installed for way over 19 years, held up pretty well, pretty decent power gains. Power steering pump is not original, although this is an OEM replacement. Alternator is not original. I think I'm on the third alternator. And in terms of batteries, I'm actually giving this diehard AGM Platinum battery a chance. It's held up pretty well. Have not had much luck with other battery brands, including Batteries Plus and also the Optima Yellow Top. And right down that cavity, right below the airbox, I do have an Enjo transmission mount in addition to an Enjo rear engine mount. Now, I did leave the front engine mount OEM. I heard once you change out the front motor mount, that'll give the cabin some crazy vibrations, but right now it's at a manageable level. But once you give it some gas, all those vibrations just disappear. It's a nice solid feel. I got passengers that love this thing. And I don't know if you can see down there with the Hasport mount, but the polyurethane is starting to disintegrate. Basically, there's this bracket that basically sits right on top of that polyurethane, and I guess over time it just basically disintegrates this area. Now, I believe Hasport is aware of this design flaw, and they've rear engineered the passenger side motor mount. So I actually might go ahead and get a full set of motor mounts, passenger, rear, and driver side motor mounts for this car. I've always had great luck with Hasport, and don't even get me started with Innovative. Those things are pieces of junk. Now, even though this engine has 259,000 miles, this is original, has never been rebuilt, and it does not leak oil. I can go ahead and show you my garage floor, but I'm not going to bore you with that. But it does burn about half a quart every 3,000 miles or so. I guess it's just nature of the beast with these iVTEC K20 motors. Now, I'm not trying to sound like a salesman here, but this is actually the best car I've ever owned out of all the cars I've had. 91 Maxima, 69 Corvette, 2016 Ford Mustang, and a 2003 Acura CL Type-S 6-speed. Now, if any of you guys are on the fence about buying an Acura RSX, whether it's a base model or Type S, just go ahead and do it. They don't build them like they used to right here. This car is solid, fun to drive, and it's just very simple, and it's easy to maintain. And for those of you wondering, VTEC works wonderfully on this car still. All right, guys, that wraps up the tour of the 2002 Acura RSX with 259,000 miles and 20 years of ownership experience. And if you guys want to see more video updates of this car, feel free to comment below. And if you guys want to wish this car a happy birthday, please give me a thumbs up. Thanks for watching and have a fantastic day.